This is your call to action. Get prepared, America. Economy, survival, energy, disasters. This is USAPrepares.com. Informative radio, educational radio. Interact now by emailing instructor@USAPrepares.com or text at 434-390-7953. Class, please take your seats. Now, your instructor, Vincent Finelli.
Watch the greenbacks tumble.
Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked? Here we go. Your dial is set correctly to USAPrepares.com, broadcasting 2 hours from high atop the Missouri Ozark Mountains. There's a link to your instructors on the website, USAPrepares.com. Podcasts are free. Converging threats are confronted daily. I'm Vincent Finelli. Matt is engineering the broadcast in Minnesota. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Welcome, Rick.
Good morning. Thank you. Yeah. Nice to see you, hear you.
Hey, Rick, I got to tell you a story. It has to do with a trip I made yesterday with our son, and we were on the interstate. And it reminded me, about 9 years ago when we moved to the farm in Missouri, the farm had a field that was 40 acres that was neglected for probably, 10 to 20 years. And this field had saplings, trees growing up that were 2.5, 3 inches in diameter all over the field. So instead of grass, it had these saplings. And so I thought, what do I do with this field? I want to turn it back into a field rather than into woods. If I just let it go, it would become woods. And I noticed that on the highway, on the interstates in Missouri, because there's so much space here, the highways had these grass medians, and there would be these mowers pulled by these, let's say 100 horsepower tractors, fairly large tractors, and they were batwing mowers. And one guy would be driving the tractor, and these mowers were 3 sections that could articulate different slopes. So each mower of this batwing assembly was 5 feet wide, and it was in tandem. And so just one guy would pull the mower, and it could articulate slopes on the left and the right and flat spots, and it could handle all this. It's very efficient. So I see that's why these mowers were developed. I thought, you know what, these guys can go over all kinds of terrain, and they can cut down saplings. So I should probably look into that. And I found that I could buy one of these mowers for $8,500. Or I could buy a smaller mower for about $6,000. And I thought, you know what? But this thing will go right over those trees, and I can mow them down. And if I mow them down long enough, I can turn that 40 acres into pasture. So I bought one of these mowers, and I used it several years, and I literally turned this 40 acres, which is a quarter of a mile by a quarter of a mile class, into pasture where the cows can, graze. Now I noticed that over the last year or so, that in Missouri, the same interstates, they were taking these grass medians that were on the interstate, and they were putting these aircraft cables on them so that you could not pull your car into the median. So this is the same area that we would mow with these great big batwing mowers, so that if there were an accident ahead, you could pull off into the median and get out of the way. Or if an ambulance had to cross over from, east to west to help accident victims, they could. Well, they put up the federal government got involved and insisted that we have installed these aircraft cable fences, if you will. And they're low fences. They really don't do much other than keep you from crossing the median. But because they were installed, the guys that are doing the mowing can't get the tractors on the median. So there's no way of mowing this. And I've been thinking, how in the heck is it possible to mow the median of the interstates in Missouri? It's impossible to get a tractor or any other equipment in there. Yesterday I saw the answer. I really did. So there was a truck that had a big orange sign on it that said, warning, mowing ahead. Okay, the first truck. Then there was a second truck that said, warning, mowing ahead. And there were 20 guys with weed whackers.
Yeah.
I'm not
the way
kidding.
it is.
Rick, 20 guys with weed whackers, and they're in a formation, mowing the median on the Interstate 44 in Missouri. And then there's a third warning truck that says, mowing ahead, which is really meant mowing behind. Now, so how do you get 20 guys to the job, right? You got to have 3 vans. So now we've got 20 guys, 3 vans, 3 trucks, 20 weed whackers. And how long do you think those weed whackers would last, right? Compared to a batwing mower that could probably last several years under extreme service that they get. So what we need to do is look at our federal government and why are they doing this stuff? They are doing this to keep us so that we can't change lanes, so that we can't get across, so we can't avoid gauntlets. They're corralling us into where they want us to go because they can't say it's for our safety. I mean, they are. That's what they're saying, but it really isn't. So what I'm saying is, Rick, when we talk about things on this radio broadcast, we talk about looking at things from a different perspective, because I called the Missouri Department of Transportation, and they're facing a budget shortfall. They want taxes to be increased because they say they don't have enough money to maintain the roads. Of course they don't. They're doing stupid stuff like putting these aircraft cables in. Instead of hiring one guy to operate a tractor, they've got 20 guys, 3 trucks, 3 vans, and 20 weed whackers.
Yeah, that's your tax dollar at work.
Right,
Yeah.
right. So maybe during this next break, I'll do a little bit of arithmetic and figure out how much this costs per hour to have the weed whacker brigade. And I can just see these guys when they come home and they talk to their neighbors, and their neighbor, moves in next door and says, "So what do you do?" And he goes, "Well, I work for the government." "Oh, really? What do you do?" "Well, I work for a Missouri Department of Transportation." "Oh, really? Exactly what do you do?" "Well, I operate some advanced technical equipment." "Really? What? Like what?" "Well, it's mechanical equipment." "Really? What? "Well, you know those guys on the highway, well, with the weed whackers? Well, that's me." How do we get here?
People on work release. That's in our state. All that is done by criminals.
Well, in Missouri, what we do is we put criminals at the head of organizations. That's what we do. We put
Yeah, the guy that bought the airline cable from a buddy.
I'm sorry, I turned around and I got this book, A Strategic Relocation, from Joel Skousen. And somewhere in this book, it talks about, I'm trying to get to the page with Missouri, and one of the things it talks about is the crime in your state. Here it is, crime. We have a lot of crime in Missouri. And corruption. Corruption in Missouri, according to Joel Skousen's book, Strategic Relocation, page 218. Corruption is high. No kidding. He's absolutely right. Joel Skousen is absolutely right. Corruption is very high in Missouri. So I wanted to share that, Rick. And then I thought I want to also talk about chemtrails with you. What are your thoughts? I mean, we talk about this all the time. Do you have any current thoughts? Because I do.
Well, it's slowly coming to pass. It's convoluted, and there are several different agencies that are involved. The primary one now, it would appear, it is military. They are trying to control the weather. The problem with these chemtrails is what they're doing is pulling the moisture out of the atmosphere in an attempt to create an artificial cloud that they can rattle, HARP, and other communications devices between the ionosphere. They're trying to control the ionosphere, and that would allow them to control the weather. Now, you told me you had 42 different aircraft passes just in your region alone. When you really think about that at, I don't know, $250,000 an hour is what it costs for a normal jet to run across the sky with labor and fuel. How much money is that? And
Rick,
to realize, I mean, it's
44.
unbelievable. And they're doing it every day that it's not raining. And what's happening now is that barium oxide and those polymers and bacteria are now inside everything, our food, our water, our body. And I'm guessing, and I have a story that we'll do it another, on another commercial, that basically it's dehydrating the body. That is the reason why various sicknesses and cancers are up. It's about dehydration and these geoengineering that's actually now affecting the human body with dehydration. You're not getting enough water to your organs because it's being captured by this polymer with barium oxide in it. I've got the data. I've got the proof of it now. It's kind of creepy how it's having a collateral damage.
Rick, I was looking at the thermometer. I have an atomic clock in the studio with me right now, and I've had it for many years. And I noticed that over the years, I could take temperatures up to 84, 85 degrees in the studio, in the summer, without air conditioning in the studio. Now, I can't. Now, when it gets to about 78 degrees, it's more than I can take. And it's not me. It really is not me. What has happened, and I noticed this last night. Last night it was 81 degrees in the farmhouse, and I absolutely couldn't take it. It was 78 degrees outside, but I just couldn't stand it. I feel like I'm overheating, Rick, and I don't believe it's me. I really think that something is in the air. The aluminum has entered our skin. It's preventing us from naturally cooling our bodies through perspiration. I'm not talking about pouring out sweat, I'm just talking about the normal perspiration. I think our bodies are being messed with, and we're in trouble. Dr. Richard Allen Miller is with us. I'm Vin Finelli. We'll be right back. Wow. I just did some very simple arithmetic. Rick, and I said, okay, so what is this mower brigade, this weed whacker brigade? How much does it cost? So I figured $10 an hour plus 70% burden rate, and that would be the overhead to have these guys employed, right? Their benefits and all that. So that'd be $17 an hour. So we got these 20 guys in formation. That's $340 an hour. 8 hours a day is $2,720 a day for these guys with the mowers, the weed whackers. $2,720 a day for these guys to walk in formation, right? And that's without the trucks to support them in the van and in the fuel and the weed whackers. You add that up, 5 days a week, that's $13,600 for the weed whackers. You multiply that times 52 weeks, let's say they work all year, that's $707,000 a year. Now, they've replaced a guy on a tractor, okay? They've replaced a $50,000 tractor, and they've replaced a $8,500 mower. And if you figure that tractor burns 2 gallons of fuel per hour for the entire year, that's $14,560 worth of fuel. So we have taken something that would cost less than $1,000, and we've turned it into a $700,000 problem. Unbelievable.
That's just the beginning.
Right.
There's storage, maintenance, warehousing. There's, you haven't even gone through the full money.
And how about seriously, I've got a couple weed whackers here on the farm, and they're a high maintenance item. I mean, you can't just weed whack for 8 hours without putting new a weed whacker string in there. They've got to change the spark plugs. They use fuel like crazy. You're always filling those things up. They're a 2-cycle engine, and they use, well, most of them are 2-cycle engines, and they use, they wear out pretty darn quickly. So they're not going to last a year. And these guys walking around every day, 8 hours a day, if they were to do that, it just won't last. So what I'm talking about, the numbers that I came up with are really, really low figure for the real problem. The real problem is get back on the tractor, call up the federal government, tell them to get that aircraft cable out of our state. Really, get it out of Missouri and everywhere else. It's a death trap.
What they need now in Missouri are Burma Shave commercials again.
Yeah. Why don't you tell us what you mean?
Being, you know.
Yeah, and class, what we're talking about is these were the signs that you would see on the roadway, and there'd be like 5, 6, 7 signs in a row, separated by a couple hundred feet. You read the first sign, and then that would give you a little bit of information. Then you read the second sign, and then the third sign, and by the time you read all of them, you had the entire advertisement understood. Well, we need to have those kinds of signs that say, fire him now, fire her now, and then you go, wonder what that means, and then it would have the name of the person that you need to fire, and then it would have their phone number, and then their address, and that's really what we need to do. These government thugs who are doing these things, like taking a less than $100,000 problem and turning it into a $700,000 problem, have lost their minds. They've lost their minds, and we've allowed them to get away with it, and they need to be fired, including the director of the Missouri Department of Transportation. And I did put his name and his phone number up on our website several weeks ago, because I had it with these aircraft cables that are guiding us into these traps. Now, I firmly believe that the reason that the federal government has done this is to corral us, and I really mean that, to drive us into a specific direction so that if they want to set up a roadblock, or if they want to take us to a prison camp, or whatever they want to do to us, there's no way out. You can't jump the curb. You can't cross the median. You can't turn around. And if there's a tornado ahead, and there's plenty of them in Missouri, just look at Joplin, look at Branson. We've had tornadoes here plenty of times, and they're devastating. You can't turn around. You cannot turn around. How do you turn around on the interstate when everybody else is coming toward you? You can't turn around. You can't back up. You can't get out of the way. And that's why we have these major pileups, because there's no place to go. And it's engineered that way. It's engineered that way. It didn't used to be engineered that way. That's why we had those grass medians where you could pull off. And, Rick, here's another thing. Let's talk about the ecology. Now, there is no vehicle that I believe that's ever been made that hasn't dripped some amount of lubricant during its lifetime. That being the case, highways have all kinds of drops of lubricant, oils, fuel. They leak tanks, whatever they're hauling, all over the road. And then when the rain comes, the rain washes that stuff into the median. We'll talk about that when we get back. So we were talking about toxins. We're talking about how when you drive your vehicle, or others drive their vehicles or trucks down the road, oil drips from the crankcase, lubrication leaks, and it leaks onto the road, and whatever else the vehicles may be carrying may leak onto the road or get transferred through the wind and onto the road. And then when it rains, that whatever it is that's on the road, those toxins get washed off to the median. Now, the grass in the median acts as a filter. It stops some of that pollution from going downstream into our drinking water supply, and it's a good thing to have. So these grass medians are more than just a place to pull off in an emergency, a safe place to go should you need to get out of the way of something ahead, or a way to turn around to avoid a catastrophe or an emergency. So the grass medians are really, really important. So if you put these armored cables there and you can't mow them, then you have a couple choices. You have the weed whacker brigade, or you let the grass grow, which is unacceptable, because then you can't see the cables buried in the grass, so that doesn't work. And the other thing is you could spray it with chemicals, toxins, which would get back into the water supply. So the original design was the best design, which is mow it with these large tractors with these batwing mowers. What do you think, Rick?
Well, the whole thing is about the difference between state and federal, and probably why the United States will eventually provincialize into provinces. In your area, it's been around corn and, this kind of nonsense that's going on. Out here, where I live on the West Coast, it's about traffic and the idea of water. Wait till you see what's going to happen in California this year about water. This is going to get real serious. The forest fires are rampant right now in both California. Now they're reporting in Colorado, Arizona, New Mexico. We're going to have a drought, the likes of which we didn't even see with the El Niños in '96. It's going to get real serious. And how it's going to affect you personally is going to be about your access to produce from California that doesn't happen this year. And that means that produce is going to go up in price, your vegetables. And it is an argument to start a small victory garden today. The problem is they're attacking us across the board in the air we breathe, the water we drink, and the food we eat. It is across the board. It's like a full assault on turning America into a third world country, literally. This median thing that you're talking about is the tip of the iceberg of what government is and why it needs to be trimmed down. We just had an election out here, and they wanted to tax $1.48 for law enforcement. It blew it away, so this time it was $1.19 for law enforcement against your property taxes and things. And it also failed. And it's crazy because what they'll do now is show you that you should have passed that bill by a crime. And what they're doing, it's all orchestrated. And this median thing, going from something that would have been take one person a quarter of a day to mow, because those mowers are actually extremely efficient. They cover it's a lot of people as a single sweep. And while that is robotics, or the idea of eliminating human wage and labor, you'll notice it's not working. And now minimum wage wants to go up. That is what the whole thing is about. The idea of why China is dominating everything. And with Russia now merging with China against the petrodollar, everything is going to fall apart in the next 2 years, literally.
Rick, you mentioned
big picture, not just a little wire running down the freeway. I mean, we're talking about a big picture. And some guy is in charge trying to come up with a better screw, and what's happening is it doesn't work, and it's so inefficient. Our roads are needing repair, bridges. I saw this thing this morning on Facebook that is about our bridges and how bad a shape they are, and how Congress isn't even addressing anything like that. So interesting. I think, the chemtrail part, the geoengineering, that is probably now even a more serious problem than Fukushima. And actually, I just finished an article. I'll send it to you for posting if you want. It'll go in the Sovereign. It's about the children of Japan and what's actually literally happening this moment in Japan. It's outrageous. And it's like showing the stoicness of the ability to do a kamikaze, during World War II. It is a Japanese mentality that is just going along with the program. And that's what we all need to do now. Just say no. You know what you're doing, these little nicks and picks on the the transportation, Missouri Transportation Department, that kind of thing, that is the tip of the iceberg.
Yeah, but I've picked on the big guys. Rick, I'm picking on the director, and the reason I'm picking on the director, these guys that are in the weed whacker brigade, it's not their fault. It really isn't. They didn't say, hey, listen, I'll tell you what, we can get rid of that big John Deere tractor or that big International tractor and that big Rhino mower. No, it's not those guys. It's their idiotic bosses, and it starts right at the top with the.
Well, the buck stops somewhere. That's right.
Right,
and so need to have the tumble process from the top all the way down, and the higher they are, the harder they fall, and that is what your vote is about.
And that's what I'm saying. So if we pick on the big guys, the top guys, and we fire them, then the people below them would say, geez, they fired the big guy. Maybe we ought to clean up our act so we don't get fired. That's why I like starting with the top. That's why I started.
What you would be like as a sheriff with a rail gun.
I'm going to run. I'm going to run for sheriff. And I won't. I really don't believe. I don't believe I'm going to need a rail gun. As a matter of fact, I'll tell you, Rick.
Because
I was in Rolla, Missouri yesterday. And it's a university town, University of Missouri, Rolla. It's got an excellent reputation. Anyway, so I was having lunch at a Chinese restaurant, and there were two state highway patrol vehicles there. One was a fully decked out Tahoe. Now, this thing had 4 antennas, blacked out windows. I mean, this thing was really, really decked out. And then next to it was parked a Dodge Charger, fully decked out. And these things are high-performance, big-engine vehicles that are consuming lots of fuel, way too much fuel. All right. So I looked into it, walked up, got out of our vehicle, walked up, and I started looking at this Dodge Charger, and I see it's got an EMP-protected Panasonic notebook computer. Okay, it's mounted. It's got a really small handheld radar gun. It's got all kinds of electronic equipment, radios. And I will say that the handcuffs that were available for quick deployment were not the hinged handcuff type. So they were the nice, politically correct handcuffs. They just hurt. They just hurt rather than cut off your circulation.
I can't believe it.
And requires, they're not the kind that will require surgery in 20 minutes. So I talked to these two highway patrolmen, and I invited them to be on the air with me. And of course, they said they were very nice. They were very nice, but they can't. They can't do it because they've got a specialist. They've got a guy.
To worry about it.
Well, it was really cool. One of the guys said, we might say the wrong thing, and I said, you mean the right thing? And he kind of smiled and said, yeah, we might say the right thing. Now these guys are really good guys, but the interesting thing was they indicated that they knew exactly when they were going to retire, to the day. They knew exactly.
Because they don't enjoy what they do.
No, they don't enjoy what they do, and I don't want to get these guys in trouble, but I'll tell you this. I talked to a police, we'll just say highway patrol at one point in time, and I won't say when it is because I'm sure that the highway patrol is listening in. That one person who I met from Highway Patrol said, when I retire, and he knew exactly when it was, he will get his opinion back.
Oh, that's great. If they're human beings, everybody is a human being. I'm wondering what the pilot must be thinking that has this creepy aircraft with no markings on it, illegal, that is filled with all these drums inside it that's dropping this propellant. I'm wondering what they think that they're doing.
Rick, I'm glad you mentioned that because I'm going to make the claim right here, right now, that pilot and that co-pilot Both of them are criminals. And there's no, Rick, there's no
they
way.
did Nazi Germany, when I was just following orders. That's
and it
true.
That's what they said, but they still ended up in the Nuremberg trials, right? But what I'm
That's
saying...
right. But look what's happening in America with all of our generals and high-end military being laid off, fired, relieved of command. Why?
Well, because they will not fire upon U.S. citizens, and they will not confiscate weapons from us, we the people. And one of them, Rick, is one of our USAPrepares.com instructors, General Paul Vallely. He was on the air with us right here at USAPrepares.com. He was fired by the golfer. He's fired by the golfer, a general fired by a guy who plays golf. Can you imagine that? Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. So Rick, this guy sees the ad in the paper, and it says... hydrochemical technician, no experience necessary. So, so this guy applies for the job, and his first day there, they give him a spray tank, and they say, and a spray wand, and they tell him he's doing the most important job in the entire inner city. And so he's going to spray for roaches, as a hydrochemical technician, right? So do you think, Rick, that this guy with no experience, do you think this guy with no experience would not say, "Hey, whoa, man, what's in the tank?" Do you think that could happen? So I'm thinking about these pilots and co-pilots. I know some pilots and co-pilots, and it's impossible to be a bozo and be a pilot. It's absolutely impossible. You have to do so many things at one time. You have to know about physics. You have to know about aerodynamics. You really have to be a pretty bright person to fly an airplane. Okay. Well, I can. Well, even a Cherokee. I was in a Cherokee, and we lost the engine stalled, and we iced up the carburetor, and we were going down, and we had to be bright enough to get that thing started again.
I would be remiss if I didn't mention that high flyer that's got 5 sidewise bodies and flies at 112,000 feet. And that doesn't have any pilot. That's a guy on the ground remote controlling that aircraft. That's what they're doing now. It's all nuts.
Yeah, well, I think that these planes that we're talking about that are spraying the chemtrails are flying with pilots and co-pilots.
Probably,
and I've seen
yes, they are. They're bigger, wider. The ones I'm talking about now, they've got stuff that even I don't know about yet. It's unbelievable. And I knew about Foxbat. I can run down the names. I was there. And today, everything that's out there, these planes, the kinds of people that they're now soliciting to run these things, there's probably where the Chinese are involved in invading our soil. Probably Chinese pilots. I'm kidding. But that's the way it would probably work.
Rick, I can tell you that before I got in a small airplane to fly in the right seat, we checked the wings, we checked the propeller for nicks and cracks. I mean, we went over that.
Oh yeah, sure.
And I've seen pilots, commercial pilots, before they will get on the aircraft that they're going to fly, they will do a walk around. They will do a visual inspection of the outside of the airplane.
Yeah,
and I've seen
for
the pilots.
Survival.
Yes,
right.
And I've seen pilots and co-pilots walk the aisles to check the inside of the plane. Now, I'm absolutely convinced, and I'll tell you why I'm going to say this. I was a volunteer fireman in the 1970s, and I took out a tanker, a 10-speed diesel tractor-trailer tanker. I took it for a ride, and the tanker was half full with water. This was where you haul water to rural fires, and what I found out was because the tanks were half full, and I came to a stop, that water would slosh forward and then it would slosh back, and you could not control stopping that tanker.
Momentum, yeah.
Right. Now, well, here's what I'm saying. And because I know that, and because I know that pilots check their aircraft before they take off, I know that the pilots would walk into the into the body of the aircraft and say, all right, what is this stuff? What are these tanks? Because they know that if whatever that fluid is that's in those tanks that's being sprayed, if that was to slosh around the way that tanker did, that 18-wheeler that I took for a ride when I was, a teenager, I know that it would. If that fluid were sloshing around in those tanks, it could drop that airplane right out of the sky. So I know that the pilots are walking around looking at what the cargo is. They want to make sure it doesn't shift and knock the plane out of the sky. So they have to know something's going on. They've got to see what's going on. Somebody's controlling those nozzles. They're criminals. These pilots and co-pilots are criminals because they know what they're doing. There's no excuse. And they should be in jail, in prison for long, long sentences. And the bosses who tell them to go fly. And their bosses, all the way up the food chain. Every one of them is a criminal, in my opinion. Dr. Richard Allen Miller and I will be right back. We've got more to talk about with ChemTrails and what happened here over the farm. And I'll tell you when we come back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller, richardallenmiller.com. Everyone all set? Cocked? Locked, hour number 2 of USAPrepares.com. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Rick, ChemTrails. We were talking about ChemTrails, hour number 1, and we have for many, many, many months. And we had 44 chemtrails over the farm last Saturday. The sky was beautiful blue, and then we saw the chemtrails starting, and then they crisscrossed, and they were X's and Y's and all kinds of patterns in the sky. And then within a couple hours, the sky became darker and darker and darker gray. And then we had these heavy clouds, and then we had thunderstorms. They ruined it. And, what we're seeing now is, and you used the term global dimming, and you're absolutely right. We have less sunlight than we used to have. And I think it's going to affect our crops. I think that they are shifting with this global engineering, this geoengineering. I believe that they are shifting the patterns of where the rain is. They're moving the rain. They're drying out California. They're going to cause famine across the United States. And that's why I say that these people who are involved, every one of them, the pilots, the co-pilots, the guys that fill the tanks with the barium and the aluminum compounds, they are all criminals, every single one, because they've got to know that these tanks are going into the air. They've got to know something about what they're doing, and they can't be blind and say, I'm just following orders.
Well, now I can give them an excuse for starting to take a closer look at things. What is happening now? The original cloud seeding was to create rain.
Yes.
In terms of San Francisco Airport, that started in the 50s, and they were doing silver chloride in the clouds to cause them to rain. However, barium and aluminum absorb water. They don't cause it to be released. They absorb it. And what the new propellant has in it is a genetically engineered bacteria. It was made in a laboratory that is a very small bacteria about the size of a large virus. It's a nanometer. And it's very small. And that means it falls through the cell walls on your skin like a small rock might through our solar system. There's nothing there to hit it. It just falls right through it. 10 to the minus 9 is about 100 times smaller than the cell wall itself. And so this bacteria is a nanite that is creating a polymer. And this polymer structure has been mathematically designed to trap water in it. And what they do is they pull barium and aluminum oxide in this infrastructure so that it attracts and pulls water out of the air. Now, if that's what it's doing up there, it is not a far conclusion to realize it's also doing that to the human body. and it's causing dehydration. And yesterday, this man called, a guy named Jeff Harvey. He's someone that's doing a lot of radio. You might interview him. He had 6 days to live. He had renal failure. He was blind from birth and was losing it. And he heard me do radio. I think it was I'm not sure who it was, but I talked about structured water. And what he did is he then called Sherry Pollack, who wrote that Fourth Phase of Water. And what happened next was Jerry hooked him up with someone that is actually making what is called easy water right now. It's a technical term for H3O2. It is one hydrogen molecule above hydrogen peroxide. And it's an activated water. He started using that, and now his cancer, in less than 1 month, is gone. He has no cancer. And his sight, for the first time, I think a really cool book that he could write would be what it's like to experience sight for the first time, having grown up without it, and then all of a sudden, for the first time in his life, he can see. Now, what exactly is happening here? Well, it would be my guess that the human body is basically becoming dehydrated on a sub-molecular level. And that is causing all kinds of sicknesses and immune system dysfunction. And cancer is basically, the body is always doing cancer. And we knew that, putting oxygen in an oxygen-rich environment blows cancer away. Basically, what you're trying to do is when your body makes a mistake in reproduction, like your skin is every day, you replace it, that it doesn't continue the mistake and mastatize. And so with that, this water is now rehydrating his body, and in less than 1 month, he's back to becoming a normal human being rather than ill. And this is why I am now focusing a lot of my research on the importance of water being even more important than your food selection. Your food selection is at a higher level of the hologram. And water is the primary foundation that when it's there, everything works right. And if you dehydrate yourself, and we're all dehydrated, now you have the possibility of eliminating all illness in man just by the water choices that you make, not the food choices. That's further down, non-GMO and blah, blah, blah with organic. We're now talking about the structure of the water that you assume coming out of the ground, well water, 7.0. We already know that 8.4 is the most optimum form of water, that if you drink water that is slightly alkaline, that what happens next is that water is not removed from bone marrow. And so you have total use of the water rather than on a cell-by-cell dehydration level. That's what I'm thinking. I'm thinking that geoengineering and this whole concept of chemtrails now is going to affect the health of man, and gas hose funding most of this. The pharmaceutical houses, I can name the names.
Well, go ahead.
There it is. Well, I'm not going to name the name. I'll post it later under, anonymous. I'll go. That's what I need. I'll get a special mask. I don't want to do this. Monsanto and Land O'Lakes and several of the others that are up there, I can't think of it. It's over in Sweden. Listen, Sweden and Norway and Switzerland are no longer neutral countries like they were during the wars. Now it is Iceland and some of those kinds of countries that are, in my opinion, have stepped outside and said no to the universe. Basically like your hangthepoliticians.com that you did, hangthebankers.com, they put 42 bankers on trial and convicted them of of war crimes, and then they closed the banks and gave the money in those banks back to the individuals that had mortgages. That's what Iceland did.
Rick, that is the way to do it, and I'll tell you why. What happens today is we have so many posts on our website about, the federal government has sued and fined and confiscated, and they'll take money from banks, for doing illegal activities, and they'll take millions of dollars from the banks. But none of those millions of dollars goes back to the victims of the crimes.
Student loans. The whole idea of I borrowed $2,300 and I now owe $42,000. I mean, that the interest compounded the way it does so encumbers everything. The whole thing's usury, and money isn't real and is about to collapse because of this petrodollar ban between China and Russia. With that happening, there is no way it's going to work.
Rick, there are people who might be listening for the very, very first time, and when they hear you say that money isn't real, they're probably saying, what? Rick, you're absolutely right.
Money's... Well, 400 years ago, 300 years ago, Rothschild took a table napkin and wrote an amount of money on it and signed his name to it. It was the first check and called it good. And there is a movie called Zeitgeist, Moving Forward. It's the third in the Zeitgeist movies. And basically, it suggests that we've had 400 years of currency concepts that doesn't work. It's time to move forward. And so I have friends, we're not even talking about Bitcoin now, I have friends that are in North Carolina that have set up in a structure of 4 states down there in the South with permacredits.com. And what they're doing, it's permaculture. It's community-supported agriculture. It is the idea that you take food off the monetary system rather than privatizing water and probably shortly the air we breathe.
Rick, yesterday I was at the bank with our son, and he opened an account and another account, and the bank was offering like the ultimate checking account, and I think that's what they call it, and they pay 1.9% interest on the balance that you have in your checking account. And you can write as many checks as you want for free and all that. Now, if you want to buy the checks, if you actually want pieces of paper with printing on them that say, the bank's name and the routing number and all that, 125 of those. It's like $25. They're really, really expensive. They used to be like $5, $8, $10. Now they're $25. But here's the point. If you want that 1.9%, you've got to use a debit card. You have to use a debit card, 10 transactions per month. They are teaching us, they are conditioning us to use cyber money, the concept. That stuff that you talked about that's not real, it's not real. It's not real. And they're teaching us to think it is real. We'll be right back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us, and Kyle Harris from Montana just joined us. Kyle, welcome.
Hey, good morning, Vince.
Hey, good morning.
I just heard Dr. Miller talking about that water, and I was wondering if he could give a few more specifics, like what is the name of it, and is there a website or something that a guy could find out more about that?
Yes, there is. I will send Vincent some posts. I'll put it on Facebook on my account. I'll put it on my website. You bet. It's you might start with Dr. Jerry Pollack. Has written a book called The Fourth Phase of Water, and the nickname is called EZ Water, or Exclusion Zone Boundaries, and that has to do with the way the water layers itself in structure. You're probably familiar, I don't know, with Willard water and the Kerry Reams concept of H709 with a free radical ion. You normally would experience that kind of water near a waterfall, where the water is falling over itself, and as it falls, it strips the electrons down to such an extent that what you have is a 3-cluster water with a free radical ion. It's activated. That's called H709 with a free radical ion. That's Willard water. Now, what we did, and then we started talking about hydrogen peroxide, H2O2, and how it was really healthy to eat that, put that in your diet, as it activated the water in your body and acted like an antioxidant. Now, what the new water, the easy water, is about is H3O2. You take hydrogen peroxide and you add an extra hydrogen molecule, atom. And when you do that, you create a special kind of bonding on your dipole moment that slightly bends it slightly and changes the way it interfaces with other materials. All water will form a boundary layer when it comes up next to a foreign object, whether it's your gut, your liver, or metal. In certain metals, you'll have the surface tension where the water will run right up that wall and down over to the other side, kind of like siphoning a hose where you're bringing the water up over a bunch and then down below itself, so it's self-falling. Now, that construct is in the molecule itself, and when you understand that water is a really small molecule, you know, it's hydrogen, which is number 1, and oxygen, number 6. The next molecule that we know of is helium, which is H2, has no dipole. It is that dipole moment that makes water so special. It's also part of why water does not compress and that you have complete transfer of energy through a system of water. That would suggest a complete transfer of information and the way it's arrayed in the molecular structure of the bonding.
Yeah, when you mentioned, I'm trying to write this down as fast as I can here. You said
Sorry about that. I'll send some links to Vincent so that you can get queued up on it.
Okay.
It's brand new, and I'm guessing that geoengineering is messing up our bodies and why cancer is so rampant. We're dehydrated because of the chemicals in the air we're breathing.
Did you say that Dr. Jerry Pollack wrote a book called The Fourth Phase of Water?
Yes, you'll find that on Amazon. He's in Seattle. He is Professor Emeritus at the University of Washington in the School of Anesthesiology. He was my lead when I worked military in the early 70s. Jerry, while he was my lead, I didn't work for him. I worked under him, but I worked around the hall because I had a higher security clearance. But Jerry is now doing it just like I am. It's cool.
You know, Vince, this is kind of completely off the subject, but you were talking about, you know, you and Dr. Miller were talking about, you know, how that all of this stuff has been arranged, and I'll hold through the break. That's all right.
Sure. Hold on through the break. Kyle Harris from Montana, USAPrepares.com instructors with us. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us, richardallenmiller.com. I'm Vin Finelli. This is USAPrepares.com. We'll be right back. Dr. Richard Allen Miller's with us. Kyle from Montana. Kyle Harris from Montana has joined us, and we're talking about structured water, the fourth phase of water. And during hour number 1, we talked about dehydration. And, Rick, during the break, you and I were talking about holy water in the Catholic Church and blessing water. And then we talked about blessing food. Rick, I think we need to tie all this together. Blessing food, blessing water, dehydration, chemtrails.
With the non-local mind. That basically there's more going on here than 21st century physics. And really, we're now understanding, Jesus, they're just laying another chemtrail down. I can't believe it. It's beautiful here, and it's just, there they go. And I can't imagine how expensive it is. It's like that mowing problem that you did the first hour.
Yeah. Rick, these guys are out of control. They're literally killing us. They're killing our animals. They're killing our plants.
Okay, so
these
this
guys
is where
are
we change things. There goes another one. That's 20 here for the morning already. Yeah, there's a map, and I'll send it to you, that shows where they're going to do chemtrails during morning, noon, and night, in what part of the country or what part of the world. They're everywhere.
Really? There's a map?
Oh, yeah. Every day it's updated. And, I just sent it to Dean Wigington that you had previous on your show. Yes, there is a map now. There is an actual monitoring service. It has to do with where rain is happening and where the currents of air are moving. It's interesting. It's not like suspicious observers. It's a group of individuals that are, mapping it now.
Rick, if we can, let me just divert for just a second. If we can map this, then we can figure out who's involved, and then we can show up at their houses.
Well, that's where we're going to go with it in the ultimate thing. The idea, though, is that you can't take and try to correct other people. What you do is you correct yourself. And one of the corrections is to just say no. And that is something you can do. That is not civil disobedience. That is just refusing to participate as a question of principles. They did that in the war when you had a conscientious objector. This same concept applies.
Yeah, and
say no.
Like the guy who's got a sign on his front yard pointing to his neighbor's house saying, my neighbor is unarmed. My neighbor is against the Second Amendment, and he's unarmed. He's unarmed. Okay, so we need to have that sign on our property pointing to the guy's house, like, this guy, my neighbor's a traitor. My neighbor is polluting the planet. My neighbor
and my neighbor was a pilot for the military. Now look, they're building cloudbusters again back onto Wilhelm Reich, and I can't believe the hokey pokey that goes on out there trying to break down these aircraft. You can't fire a missile at it. You could point a laser, but they're so far up there, the ability to bounce that laser would require a university could do it. Oh, maybe we could get a whole bunch of universities to do it, different graduate students united. They did that when I was in graduate school. There were movements, like the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. I studied under with SNCC. And I have to tell you, it's reminiscent, only exaggerated by the square of it. It's like that much worse today. I can't believe it.
Rick, so right now what we've done is we have called to order the graduate students. We want them to unite against. We want them to unite.
Graduate students are there as open, free spirits. Always, when I was in grad school, that's how you got there.
Yeah. Okay, so Rick, here
that was the requirement. You had to have that questioning, and imagine working in units with other universities pointing lasers at aircraft.
Well, Rick, it's against.
No, knock, knock. Who's there? Little old lady. Gee, I didn't know you could yodel.
Rick, we can't advocate pointing lasers at aircraft. So, class, seriously, do not point lasers at aircraft.
No,
however,
do not. I'm just kidding. It is a wake-up call for everybody.
Right. It's a wake-up call for graduate students. So if you're a graduate student, my email address is vincent@usaprepares.com. Vincent@usaprepares.com. And we are asking you to organize with us all graduate students who are interested in finding out more about these chemtrails, figuring out where they are originating, who the pilots are, who's involved, and let's get the word out and let's get this to stop. It's out of control.
Yeah,
and
here's a story nobody knows. When I was in graduate school back east, and I was working for Old Man DuPont, I wanted to go to Columbia University for my doctorate, and they would not take me. I was a top draft pick for physics, but the administration wouldn't take me because I was one of the 10 that took over their administration building as a demonstration of how lax their security was. They were manufacturing chemical weapons on campus, and I and 9 other graduate students actually organized the Columbia University takeover. I was one of them that did that while I was in grad school, and that's why I wasn't able to go to Columbia. I had to end up at MIT.
Kyle, you've got a question for Rick about structured water?
Well, no, I've kind of got the information that I needed there. But what I was gonna, Vince, when a guy sits back and you start understanding that, you've got the chemtrails, you've got this huge banking fraud worldwide. The chemtrails are worldwide. There is. It's like this thing is so huge. You come to the point to where it's almost like even the right-left paradigm,
that's why they call it transcontinental. They're bigger than countries.
Yeah,
they're transnational corporations, and they're bigger than countries.
I'm starting to think that the only my thought process on this is that the only way anybody is going to have any kind of control is only on a very small local level.
Personal level. Start there. Take responsibility for yourself and your intentionality. If you do that, even if it appears to be in conflict with mine, for example, that's God's will. That's the fact that the two of us are only in 4th grade and can't see 5th grade or the bigger picture. However, what I'm doing is talking about it. That's part of my purpose here, to wake people like you up, and then you start working other people. You start with yourself.
Yep. Dr. Miller, I got a question on that very thing right there. So you start with yourself, and I've pretty well done as much as I can do for myself. I mean, I'm still working on it. Obviously, everybody is. But, I mean, as far as doing things that, getting ready. But, if they... having this huge financial situation that they've got in this country and the rest of the world, I mean, Spain, Italy, all those places are falling apart. Once they collapse this entire thing, there's just going to be no escape. I mean, even Vince and I and everybody else, you've just got very limited resources. You know what I mean?
That's why you barter.
That's why you what?
Barter.
Yeah, I agree. But, think about this. I've tried to run this out in my mind. Okay, so you barter.
You have skills that I don't have.
Yes, sir.
And
I understand that.
You have a relationship with me in barter.
Okay, but let's just think about this. Let's carry this out on a scroll kind of thing. If we get down to the point where both of us are hungry, and you can grow some, but it's not going to be enough to feed you and everybody else.
You would be unbelievably surprised. Personally, I've seen 4-year-olds feed one single 4-year-old be able to do enough just in play to feed 20 adults that malnutritioned. And when I say that, it's choices of why we would eat things. This morning on Facebook, I posted the definitive on aspartame. The idea of people being fat because they're eating wheat and then doing a diet soda to try to counteract their overweight, can that go?
Yep.
The whole thing is distractions on what is important and what is not. The Earth, it feeds us. We did it when we were migratory. We did it when we were farmers. We're doing it even in space. The only reason what they're doing now is experiments with the ionosphere so that they can leave orbit. That is the problem, is the Van Allen belt. And, astronauts, colonists, whatever, anything going across that Van Allen belt is going to get nuked to the point where their children may or not have the third eye metaphor. Now, that's what the Van Allen belt does as the good, the bad, and the ugly. And nobody's talking about any of this except what they're doing with HAARP is they're creating this sheath that they can ricochet like I guess you could call it a waveguide. That's essentially what it is for comm, for communications, and nefarious. And when I talk about nefarious, I posted yesterday on Facebook also about the new microchip that just came out of Stanford.
Oh, man.
It gets better and better. You can put it in the water you drink.
Hold that thought, Rick.
And it's
Hold that thought, Kyle. Rick and Kyle, I just went to the website petkey.org, petkey.org, and they have a registry, and they say keep them safe at home with a lifetime microchip registration. Registering your pet's microchip. You, the parent, you can register your pet's microchip. So once your pet has been found, once somebody says, I wonder if this animal has a microchip, let's check it, they can find out who you are and, return your lost loved one to you.
That's the stuff I was doing in the early 70s in anesthesiology. And here we are, 45 years later.
Rick, whatever happened to a collar with a tag? So what I did, our animals have collars, and either I've written with a black magic marker, Finelli with our phone number on it, or they have a tag that has Finelli with a phone number on it, and they, anybody who finds one of our animals can give us a call. It's really simple. They don't have to say, shoot, honey, got this animal. I wonder if it has a microchip. Where can we get a microchip scanner so we can find out who this animal might belong to? This is the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. And so you can register your animal's microchip. So I just typed in a registration number, and I typed in, as a lark for my own amusement during the break, I typed in my registration number that I made up on the spot, and it's OOICU812, like ICU812, like a microchip, because you're talking about eating a microchip, right? It's in the water. Well, it won't let me register because it won't. It won't let you use the letter.
It's about going feral, going off the grid. It means a lot more in terms of sovereignty.
Well, this is ludicrous. People think that their animal is going to be safe because they've chipped it with a microchip. They think their little puppy, their little chihuahua, their kitten is going to be safe. It's nonsense. And this petkey.org will let you register the major brands. There's 16 brands of microchips. So veterinarians are inserting these microchips in animals. I think it's the dumbest thing I've ever heard of. I really do.
Just like how would you like to do that in your children?
Yeah, it's crazy, and I'm not going to do it, and I'm not taking. Yeah,
and the new development out of Stanford, they've got one now that shows that it's smaller than the grain of a rice. It's smaller.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and Kyle, you've got some thoughts on this?
Yeah, think about that, Vince. Just carry that out. I mean, because people are eating this stuff up like it was ice cream. You know what I mean? There is, and I think this is all preparation, because I think Dr. Miller talked about barter. I think they're going to outlaw that. They're going to make it so that you cannot buy nor sell unless you have these chips.
Well, I'll tell you,
I think that's coming.
You're right. You're right. My son wanted to rent a house in an area where he's going to be moving. And I'll tell you what, it's almost impossible. He drove up with a car that he owns, paid cash for, a nice car. And they said, yeah, but, you know, you don't have a job. And he goes, yeah, I don't have a job. And my dad hasn't had a job either. So the two of us are sitting there, and we don't have jobs. And my son can afford this house, but they won't let him rent it. They won't let him rent it because he doesn't have a job. Well, that doesn't mean he doesn't have income. He doesn't have a job. He's an entrepreneur. And you're absolutely right. They are clamping down. The banks are saying, you don't have a job. You're not a slave. So how could you possibly afford rent if you're not a slave? It's
Exactly
unbelievable.
right.
The banks, the insurance companies, they're all in cahoots against we the people. So my son is either going to have to buy a house or he's going to have to figure out some other method of getting, living accommodations. He might have to find someone who does have a job to sign a lease that my son can sublet from him. I mean, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, I agree with you, Vince. I think, they say they're going to want to kill off 90% of the world's population. They're headed that way real fast.
Yeah, and let's start with them. Kyle, thanks so much for being with us.
You bet.
Dr.
Thank
Richard
you.
Allen Miller, richardallenmiller.com, Richard, A-L-A-N, Miller.com. Thanks so much for being with us. No meetup on Monday. We are observing Memorial Day. I might be cutting hay. No meetup on Monday. Class, above all, honesty and integrity. What happens next is up to you.